Welcome to the first episode of our 2006 NBA Finals Rewatch. On today's show, we'll revisit Miami's Game 1 loss to the Mavericks, set the stage for Dwyane Wade's legendary series, and ask the biggest questions, what-ifs, and hypotheticals of the series. All of that and much more coming up on today's Locked On Heat.
Terry puts it up. Won't go. Rebound Wade. The Miami Heat, they've done it. They win their first championship in franchise history.
Congratulations, Miami Heat. 2006 NBA champions.
But it was our time. I really believe that it was our time.
It's one of the best feelings I ever had in my life. So I'm going to live it up. So we deserve it.
Welcome to Locked On Heat's 2006 NBA Finals Rewatch, where we are living it up, David. On today's show, we'll revisit Miami's Game 1 loss to the Mavericks. We're really excited for this. Thank you so much, first of all, for following along. As we said last week, as we've been sort of promoting this thing, these episodes or these games are available on NBA League Pass. And I'm sure you can find highlights and things like that on YouTube as well. So watch along with us. This is Game 1. We're going to be doing all 6 games of this series. We're going to go through each game of the very first finals win in the organization's history. We'll discuss the best performances, the biggest what-ifs. We're going to go through a lot of fun categories. This is not just your typical recap of a game, right? This is going to be really fun. We've worked a lot on this, and we're really excited to bring it to you. So, obviously, starting with Game 1 here of the series, David, let's just jump right in. Why don't you set the stage for us?
Well, it was obviously a monumental point in Miami Heat history. The 2005-06 Miami Heat were built for the NBA championship, even if no one actually believed they could win it. They had traded for Shaquille O'Neal in 2004. The Heat fell short in his first playoff run in Miami against the defending champion Detroit Pistons in the Eastern Conference Finals. They were close, but not good enough. And so Pat Riley blew up the team, executing one of the largest trades in league history. 5 teams and over a dozen players, bringing Antoine Walker, James Posey, and Jason Williams to Miami. The Heat added more depth later in the season with guards Derek Anderson and Gary Payton, the latter a Hall of Famer looking for a ring and hoping he could get it in Miami. But things started off disastrously that season. An injury to O'Neal in just the second game of the season sidelined him for 18 games. Stan Van Gundy had a lot of the group in the first 2 seasons as head coach, but living and dying with every possession wears thin with accomplished veterans, and he lost the locker room early on. Missing O'Neal certainly didn't help, and with Riley's shadow looming large, Van Gundy resigned after an 11-10 start. National media, of course, thought it was Riley who had fired Stan to satisfy his huge ego and inserted himself as head coach. The season was less than a quarter underway, and already it seemed doomed, but O'Neal came back, and along with Wade's 27.2 points per game, Riley motivated his team to a 41-20 record, finishing with 52 wins and the second seed in the Eastern Conference behind the Pistons' league best 64 wins. The Heat didn't breeze their way through the playoffs either. It took them 6 games to dispatch a young Bulls team. Things were a little easier in the next round when they faced off against Jason Kidd, Vince Carter, and the then New Jersey Nets, rolling through them in a gentleman's sweep, and that set the stage for an Eastern Conference Finals rematch versus the Pistons, a defensive slugfest where neither team surpassed 98 points in any one game. Miami would steal Game 1, but before Detroit evened things up in Game 2, the Heat returned to Miami, took both games there at home to take a 3-1 series lead, and after getting blown out in Game 5, eventually closed out the series in Game 6 to advance to the finals for the first time in franchise history. Out west, the story for the Dallas Mavericks was completely different. They won 60 games in the regular season, third best behind the Pistons and the Spurs, who had won the title in 2005. Dirk Nowitzki was in his prime, scoring 26.2 points per game to push the Mavs to the most efficient offense in the league. And their defense was solid too, holding opponents to just 93 points per game. They'd sweep the Grizzlies in the first round, then face San Antonio in the semifinals. Pundits believed that the victor would wind up being the likely NBA champion. The series went down to 7 games, and everything was breaking in Dallas's favor. Next, they faced the 7 seconds or less Phoenix Suns in the Western Conference Finals, managed to keep pace offensively, ultimately winning the series in 6 for Dallas's first trip to the finals as well. Mavs head coach Avery Bradley was named Coach of the Year. Nowitzki was in his prime, again, the MVP race at that point. And while Shaq and Wade had their share of accolades, a Game 1 loss was just a confirmation that Dallas was a team of destiny while Miami wasn't even supposed to be there. That O'Neal was no longer the force that he was in Los Angeles, and that Dwyane Wade wasn't a superstar yet.
That was phenomenal. Yeah, you're talking through that, and it just takes me back to watching the Heat that season, right? And you just this young Dwyane Wade, end of his prime, kind of Shaquille O'Neal. The team
Yep.
you mentioned. I want to go back to what you said about that the trade that they made. It was at that
Oh yeah,
time, and I think still is, right? The biggest trade
was one
in
of them.
NBA history, right? Where it had the most players involved. A trade that completely changed the face of that team. And we're going to
Yep.
talk about Antoine Walker and Gary Payton and all the guys that came over throughout this entire series that we're doing throughout the finals here. And yeah, I just think about that season, and I just remember that feeling of how when they kind of figured it out later in the year and everything started
Yep.
to mesh. It kind of reminded me of the 2003 Florida Marlins,
Hmm.
where they made a couple of trades at the deadline. Then
Yep.
they add like a Derek Lee at first base, and then all this stuff happens, and you kind of just come together. You get some good pitching from your
Right.
aces, and the next thing you know, they're in the World Series playing the vaunted Yankees. And you mentioned the Mavericks there. It's Dirk
Yeah.
Nowitzki. He's one of the faces of the NBA at that time. Avery Bradley, like you said, head coach of the year and all this stuff. And you just couldn't stop the hot Marlins against the Yankees. And ultimately, the Heat obviously won these finals. But it didn't start off well for them. They lost the first two games of the series.
Oh yeah, that's a good point. And look, think of the drama surrounding Van Gundy. Like everybody was so opposed to the Heat
Yeah.
because it was just like this idea that Riley had forced Van Gundy out, that he fired him, and I mean that's still a hotly contested debate. Although Van Gundy and Riley both have said they had no hand in it, there was no firing, that he just chose to walk away. But there was just
Do you believe
this
that?
stink. I kind of do. I think there were conversations. I think Riley probably said, as Pat Wood, he's like, look, this is it. We've got this team. I can see it all. Like Riley, being the mastermind that he is, orchestrated that trade because he knew it needed tweaks. They needed to get rid of some players that they were
Yeah.
really good in 05. And without Wade's injury, if they had knocked off the Pistons, they probably could have knocked off
Well,
the
he said it
Spurs
this
in
year. I
05
thought it was
too.
really interesting. He revisited that trade. What did he say? It was something like, I needed guys with swords and shields or something. And he was
Yeah.
talking about
Yeah.
that. And I don't know that I had ever heard him say that before. Maybe he did somewhere else. But when he was talking with us media before this year, he talked about the swords and the shields. And like, yeah, these guys did have swords and shields. Gary Payton
Yeah.
had a glove.
Yeah.
So,
Antoine Walker, an older veteran, looking for a chance to kind of reestablish
yeah.
his identity a little bit. It was fantastic.
He fired Van Gundy. I don't believe the resignation stuff. He was fired. If he wasn't fired, it was like you're in a relationship,
Strongly
right? And you
pushed
just
out, yeah.
your significant other makes it known that she has no interest in being with you anymore, to the point where
Yeah.
you're just not even enjoying this. And maybe you did the breakup, but dude, you've been broken up with for a long time already. You just didn't know it yet. And I think that's what happened to SVG.
It's
there.
not you, it's us. We don't want you
Right.
here. Sorry.
Exactly. Let's go into some trivia here. We're going to be doing this before each of these episodes as well, before we launch into some of the categories. You don't know what I'm going to ask you. That's kind of the fun of
know.
this. But if you're listening, if you're watching, also obviously follow along with us. First question here, David.
All right, I'm ready.
The Heat were the first of the four 1988 and 1989 expansion franchises to win a championship. Can you name the other three, and which is the only other one to make a finals at all?
Well, the Orlando Magic, that's for sure. And
Yeah.
it's the Minnesota Timberwolves and Charlotte Hornets.
Ding. I should have a sound effect for that.
That's okay.
I just did it myself. That's fine. That was an easy one. We started with you an easy one. All right. What was the joking nickname of these NBA finals?
Oh, the American Airlines here, because they both played at the American Airlines Center in Dallas, the American Airlines Arena in Miami.
Ding. I think we do actually have applause. We could do that. There we go.
I feel
That's
special.
for you, David. For
Thank
you
you
and the
so
listeners that got it, you feel special. All right, now it's gonna get harder. All right.
All right.
So Dwyane Wade ends up winning Finals MVP of this series. He averaged
Spoiler alert.
34.7 points per. Yeah, in case you didn't know, from 16 years ago, averaged 34.7 points per game since 1990. Okay, so since 1990, that's important. Only 6 other players have ever averaged more points per game in a finals. Okay, so just one finals, not like the whole finals career, just one finals series. Can you name the 6 players who since 1990 averaged more than 34.7 points per game? Before you guys, just a brief pause here. Let the listeners kind of catch up, and let's go.
Yeah. 37.4 points per game?
34.7. I'm sorry if I said
34.7.
34.7.
Okay. I'm going to go Michael Jordan.
Yeah, he actually did it twice. Yep.
All right. LeBron James.
Yeah, he did it one time. 2014-15, by the way, for LeBron. Never did it in Miami.
Kobe Bryant.
No.
Ooh. Wow. That thing's getting significantly more interesting. Wow. Steph?
Not Steph. No.
Not Steph. Well, now Allen Iverson maybe in his
Yes.
finals run.
Yep.
Okay.
Got Iverson in
I
2001.
Yeah. Oh, man, this is tougher than I thought.
You want a hint?
Sure, I'll take it.
Kobe's teammate.
Kobe's teammate. Shaq?
Shaq. Did it twice, actually.
Interesting. Wow.
Shaq
Yeah, you kind of
actually
yeah, makes sense.
in 2000,
During the
38
three-peat, yeah.
points a game.
Yeah. Kind of
Unbelievable, man.
unstoppable
People
force, yeah.
forget how dominant he is because he's sort of a meme now, and this is what's gonna be fun as we go through this. Also, I
Yeah.
think a little bit is just revisiting some of these players that I think some younger Heat fans. I think there's a lot of people who listen to the show, David, honestly, who don't even remember, might not have been alive for the 2006 finals. Like that's
Oh,
I think
entirely.
a lot,
Well,
yeah, a lot
yeah,
of our fan base
entirely
does skew
possible.
young a little bit.
Yeah. I
Shaq
got
also in
5.
2002 was 36.3 points per game. I mean, this guy was dominant. And I have a Shaq point later on, but okay, you have 2 more.
I can't. No, I got
One's
5.
easy, man.
Jordan.
You're
I
you're
got one
missing
more.
you're missing an easy one,
Okay.
obvious one. One of the greatest scorers of all time.
Deion Waiters. He didn't play in the finals. I'm drawing a blank here. No, I can't figure it out.
Kevin Durant,
Oh, that makes more sense. Yeah.
yeah, in 2017, and then
Yeah.
Giannis 2 years ago.
Yeah. That
Giannis
also makes
averaged
a lot of sense.
Giannis was 35.2, so just a smidge over Dwyane Wade's 34.7.
Interesting. Interesting.
All right, we got time for you know what? No, let's I'll save these for some other episodes. All right.
All right.
Coming up next. Oh no, wait. Do you have a takeaway? No, let's save that too. We'll save the takeaway for the next segment. So
All
we're
right.
gonna do our biggest takeaway from game one. We'll get into that, and we're getting into our categories after this. You're listening to Locked On Heat's Champion Series, revisiting the 2006 NBA Finals. Today's episode is brought to you by Built Bar. And look, if you haven't tried Built Bar Puffs yet, you're really depriving yourself of one of life's greatest joys. And guess what? There's a new flavor. Ready? Delicious, indulgent cookie dough covered in chocolate. That's right. Built has done it again. Let me introduce you to your new favorite, cookie dough chunk puffs. Have a light and chewy texture, real cookie dough chunks, and of course, they're covered in 100% real chocolate. All of the joys of eating cookie dough without the hassle of making it. Plus, it's healthy for you. Cookie dough chunk puffs are only 160 calories, and they have a whopping 15 grams of protein. Run to Built.com to snag a box for you and the family. It's the perfect treat during the day. You could find a really good hiding place, maybe, if you don't want to share them with your family and just hoard them for yourself, whatever you got to do. Like all Built bars, the new cookie dough chunk puff is covered in 100% real chocolate. That means they're healthy and they're tasty. Chocolate-covered cookie dough with a light, fluffy texture. And what's great about Built is that all of their bars are made with collagen protein, which your body absorbs more efficiently and provides tons of health benefits. Eat something that tastes good and is good for you. You're going to love the new cookie dough chunk puff, whether you need a snack for your workout, a late night treat, or just need to grab a quick bite. Built is the perfect protein bar, and they taste better than a candy bar. Ditch the calories, ditch the fat and the sugar. Grab yourself a Built bar. Here's our offer. Go to Built.com. Use the promo code LOCKED15 for 15% off at Built.com. Again, just go to Built.com for 15% off. Just use that promo code LOCKED15. Back here with Locked On Heat's 2006 NBA Finals Rewatch. David, you and I went back, watched Game 1 on League Pass, where everybody can find it and follow along with us. What was your biggest takeaway from the game?
It's interesting. You watch it just not from a stylistic perspective, but just even from an organizational perspective. Things have changed so much over the last 16 years. And of all that started slowly building up from 2006 forward. Like there was the quote unquote big three in San Antonio, but that seemed a little different. Like Tim Duncan was clearly the best player there. Ginobili and Parker wound up evolving into Hall of Fame players and achieved a lot of great team success. But I don't know that anybody perceived those groups in particular as being overly talented as other groups later on did, specifically the 2008 Boston Celtics that had three very clear Hall of Famers in Allen, Kevin Garnett, and Paul Pierce there. And then, of course, Miami's own big three. So you're looking at these Dallas teams and Miami, and none of them feel like a powerhouse. They almost feel like they had just kind of clawed their way there, although obviously Dallas won a lot of regular season games. You've got Dirk Nowitzki, the second best player, never was an all-star. Jerry Stackhouse was on the roster, an older former all-star, but it wasn't like this overpowering group with this sheer amount of talent. There was absolutely no big three. And on Miami side, you've got an older Shaq who looked worse and worse as the series projected, and Dwyane Wade who wasn't quite there yet. And it felt very, very different than watching the finals nowadays. Like you look at the finals, you've got 4 Hall of Famers on one side, 4 on the other. You've got guys that are like nearing the tail end of their careers who've had great, great careers, and they're chasing a ring. None of that felt the same way that it did against this series.
Yeah, you just watched like that backcourt that Miami would play with Jason Williams. He was just getting roasted by Jason Terry the entire game, and you're just like, this guy would get played off the floor in these last finals. There's no way he could survive. There's just no way. And they're talking about Josh Howard. Like he's the second coming of Scotty Barnes or something. Like they're just like, this guy is one of the most versatile players in the league. And he had an okay career. He played in the league for a long time, but it's like they were just like talking about Josh Howard like he was a future Hall of Famer, like he was Scottie Pippen or something. I couldn't believe it. You're right. You're absolutely right. My biggest takeaway was just I think when people think back to 20-ish years ago and and these kind of finals in this era of basketball, this part is sort of still almost considered the 90s, the way people talk about it a little bit, and it was definitely more of an old school game. The pace was much slower.
For sure.
There was one play where Jason Williams just pounds the air out of this ball for 16 seconds. It's literally just there's 8 seconds on the shot clock, and then he just finds Dwyane Wade crawling off a screen, and he settles into and he bricks a 15-footer. And I'm just like, that's your offense. But at the same time, too, there was still it wasn't completely Stone Age stuff. Like there was normal, like fast break guys would still sprint to the corners, right? There was just normal things happening. A lot of high screen and roll, right? Like a lot more than I remembered it being. And look, both teams combined for 38 threes. And so for reference, both the Warriors and the Celtics surpassed 40 threes in game 1 of these last finals. So not a lot, but a lot of the actions were similar. It's just they would settle in for these like 18 and 19 footers on pick and pops, right? It was just Udonis Haslem hitting that patented mid-range jumper where if, they take a few steps back, a lot more of those long twos would ended up obviously counting as threes. So like aesthetically, it didn't look as different as I actually expected it to look. It was just little nuances that kind of obviously changed the game and turned it into the modern game we know now. But it's not completely different the way I think people talk about it.
A lot of it was personnel. A lot of it was overall style and approach and things like that. And we talked about this in a recent episode. Every possession from Miami side of thing, dumping it off to Shaq, letting him kind of hold the ball. If he's got an opening there, if he can kind of pivot and get into the lane or whatever, then he's got that shot. Or if he has to create a look for an outside shooter with his passing ability, then obviously that happens there. But not a lot of free flowing, not multiple cuts. The off screen action, the off ball action wasn't quite as intense, and certainly to your point, not a lot of 3-point shooting. Nobody was looking for that. And I think if anything, Pat Riley was probably a little frustrated at the amount of threes that were taken that game, particularly because they weren't hitting them. Like I think over the course of the regular season, Miami was actually one of the better shooting teams. They did have Walker, they had Williams,
Capono off the bench.
Capono off the bench. Dwyane Wade actually was excellent as a 3-point shooter during the regular season, and then something else happened towards the tail end of that career. But he was a good 3-point shooter at that point in time. So again, there was it wasn't people just didn't expect the 3-point shot as easily as they do today, and it did feel a lot slower. Also, the pace of the game did feel a lot slower because there was just so much dumping the ball off, working the shot clock, and not as many
working
shots
out of the post. Everything went through Shaq in the post, right? And so what my other things was. I'll save the Shaq point here. Let's actually get into the game here. Let's get into some of our categories. Our very first category is the turning point of game 1. I'm going to start here. My turning point was when Jason Terry makes back-to-back threes to extend the Mavericks lead to 10. 8 minutes to go in the fourth quarter. At that point in the game, Jason Terry had that huge second quarter. He ends up going at halftime with 20-something points. And Miami looked like they were in control after the first quarter. Dallas comes back. Miami can't hit a shot. They start turning the ball over a bunch in the second and third quarter. And then they do end up coming back a little bit. They claw back into the game in the third quarter. But at the beginning of the fourth quarter, Jason Terry just goes off and, again, hits back-to-back threes to extend that lead to 10. Miami got it close a little bit throughout, but still they just sort of were bricking shots, turning the ball over a lot. The offense got in mud, and it turned out that 10-point cushion, even with 8 minutes to go, ended up being enough for Dallas. But also, when we're talking about the modern feel of this game, to me, the game was won with 3-pointers, right? From Jason Terry. So that's a little bit of a modern flow too. So that was my turning point. What about you?
No, yeah, one team was hitting them, the other team was not. Unfortunately, that was in Miami, and Shaq was just not dominant enough at that point in his career where you could give him 40 touches a game and just have him go to work, and knowing that he was going to create as much offense as he once did. My turning point was
Miami
actually.
I'm sorry, you're right. Just to your point, to put a number to it, Miami was 5 of 20 from 3-point range. Dallas was 6 of 18. 6 of those came from Jason Terry. Jason Terry made 4 of 7. And I think like Stuart Scott, who was obviously alive and did an awesome job as a sideline reporter, by the way. He was really, really good. Said something about how Jason Terry made more threes in this game 1 than he had in the previous Western Conference Finals combined. He made 4.
Yep.
He made 4 of them. So just,
Well, Terry was actually responsible for another turning point, I think, was actually in the second quarter. You mentioned that big quarter from him. Miami was up 9 with 7 minutes left in the second quarter, and then Terry goes in for a dunk that just electrified the America Airlines Center crowd. And from that point, everything just seemed to shift in Dallas's favor. They wound up going on a 23-6 run that extended into the third quarter. They had the lead by halftime. Again, Miami had been up 9. They lost the lead. And while Miami eventually came back and wound up taking a meager 1-point lead at some point in the third, it just wasn't enough. It just felt like everything was going for Miami's and Dallas's favor, especially with Terry hitting those shots. Nowitzki struggled early on because of Udonis Haslem providing excellent defense on him, challenging every shot in a way that very few players at the time could.
Was not a player he was absent the entire series, wasn't he? I didn't feel Dirk Nowitzki's presence in game 1 at all. I mean,
late in the game, he had a couple of shots late in the game when Udonis was in foul trouble. And I think that was a big thing. Like they had Walker on him or Posey, neither of them big enough. Like Udonis was like the most switchable defensive type player, like that kind of akin to what you'd see in today's game. Like you didn't have anybody like that who could guard a 7-footer like Nowitzki, who could shoot from 20, 22 feet out. That's another thing too. Nowitzki never known as much of a 3-point shooter, although he was a great shooter, but also just doing most of his damage from the mid-range over and over again. But he had a couple threes late also.
16 points on 4 for 14 shooting for him, 10 rebounds, 4 assists. I mean, it wasn't a terrible game. It was just it just felt a little quiet. With Shaq too, I mean, he ended up with 17 points and 7 rebounds, but he had a couple of dunks in that fourth quarter that clawed into that 10-point lead that I was talking about earlier with Dallas. And again, it wasn't enough, but it kind of just felt the entire game that he was being defended really well by Dallas. And they had Dan Pierre and who's the other guy that they had?
Desanya Diop.
And those are like 2 guys who were almost as big as Shaq. They had legit 7-footers. And they did a nice job on Shaq, but he had his moments later. And again, 17 points. He was like completely absent. But
it's just funny how you had a guy on the roster who was at least 6'10", 6'11", and weighed over 270 pounds. Like I mean, it's just nobody.
There was lineups where it was Shaq, Udonis Haslem, and Antoine Walker was playing small forward. I mean, that would never. I guess it would. I guess you
Walker's
see like
bigger and heavier
playing
than PJ Tucker now, but it's just funny. I mean, you've got, but all of those players were like bigger, like just heavier in general. Like Jared Allen. I mean, what's he like? 240, 250 at most, if even. It's just different. I know he couldn't have played center at that point in time. Not going up against Shaq. Anything.
Let's do one more category before we go to break here. We're gonna do this every game too. It's gonna be called the Flashbulb moment, a moment that added to Dwyane Wade's burgeoning legacy. Again, I'll start here. He had this crazy dunk at the end of the third quarter. And here's the thing that stood out to me, David, is just the first step was elite, right? Like just absolutely elite with him. But he would also, at times, he would just kind of tunnel his way into the paint and get a drop-off pass or something from Shaq with that behind the back thing that he liked to do. And he would just come off of 2 feet and dunk on somebody with this level of violence that should not be possible from just a stagnant position to start with. It was unbelievable, his explosiveness and that just sheer athleticism and that ability to go from 0 to 5 million in that way. Again, just dunking off of 2 feet with such strength and violence. I have the call for it right here. Like it was patented Mike Breen, who I have a point on Mike Breen later on, but that was my flashbulb moment. It was on the biggest stage and it was an incredible dunk.
Yeah, it's hard not to watch Wade and just marvel at the athleticism. It's kind of like I remember rewatching at one point. I want to say Jordan's 85 or 86 playoff run, where his
Yeah.
athleticism is just a whole other level. I mean, not to say that players in general, they weren't plumbers and whatever delivery men and things of that sort. They were not as athletic as Michael Jordan, and Wade had that. And also to your point about his playmaking ability, they were just a few years removed from having like Penny Hardaway and the idea that you have to have a bigger point guard a la Magic Johnson. Like you couldn't have a point guard that was that small, although Miami wound up, trending that way anyway with Jason Williams. But, Wade's early career was mostly at the point too, because he was kind of, 6'3", 6'4"-ish, good ball handler, obviously good passer. And so his playmaking ability was just on a whole other level. He wound up leading the team in assists, and he certainly did throughout the playoffs as well. So incredible moment from him. I've also, for me, just seeing a back-to-back series where on one possession, he blocks the ball, he comes from out of nowhere on the weak side and just erases a shot, speeds up court and control the whole time with the ball, and winds up going in for this incredible acrobatic lay-in. Just unbelievable. Just the end-to-end speed, the pure ball handling, everything.
What did you
just so
text me?
different from the version of Wade.
You were watching it mid-watch, and
Yeah.
you just texted me. What was it that he was
He was just so good. He was just so good.
That was the text. You're right.
Yeah.
You're right. He was so good. And this
You
is
forget.
obviously you forget
because
it was before the MVP caliber seasons. It was before 30 points in a season. It was obviously much before the big three.
Yep.
But he was just so athletic, and the way that they talk about him and Dirk, by the way,
Oh, yeah.
it's so interesting. These young stars, it's going to be their league. I actually have let's see if I could play this really quick. There's a really good story from the broadcast crew, Mike Breen and Hubie Brown.
Wade explodes. That first step, he's gone. He gets that step and he turns the corner. There's nothing you can do about it because he catches you on his shoulder. And I don't care what you try to do, there is no way you're going to prevent him from dunking unless you foul him.
Avery Johnson knows he has his hands full with Wade. Now Riley says he sees it in Wade's eyes when he steps on the court. He's a very humble player, but inside he knows he wants to be the best player on the court every single night. And Riley and him have talked about him being the first of the celebrated class of 2003 to win an NBA championship. Now Darko Milicic won one with Detroit, but he didn't really have a role. He wants Wade to be that first one to lead a team to a title.
All right, so we're going to talk about this broadcast crew here in a second because I think there's some interesting trivia to go along with that too. Also, we got a really fun category. It's called the Time Machine Trade Machine. We're going to get to all that next on our 2006 NBA Finals Rewatch here on Locked On Heat. Back here with Locked On Heat, this is our 2006 NBA Finals Rewatch. We are revisiting Game 1 here. We had our turning point. We had our Flashbulb moment. We had some trivia, and we laid the stage for what ended up being Miami's very first championship in franchise history. We're going to continue along with our categories here. Remember, if you want to interact with us, do so in the YouTube comments. You can find us on Twitter at LockedOnHeat. Email us at lockedonheat@gmail.com. Our next category here is going to be called Bang and Brown, where we take an interesting just part of the broadcast from the game that we're talking about, just dive a little deeper in it, because this is a really interesting broadcast in general, and I've just got some takeaways from it. But an interesting trivia note here. This was the only NBA Finals to ever feature Mike Breen on play-by-play and Hubie Brown as the color analyst.
Good. So much better than Mark Jackson and Jeff Van Gundy.
And this was the last year before Mark and Jeff took over next to Breen.
Yeah, because Jeff got canned from the Houston Rockets, wound up taking over the spot there. Mark Jackson hadn't taken over the Golden State
Wasn't
Warriors
a good year
yet.
for the Van Gundys.
No, it wasn't. A lot of firings going around. But, at least they spent Thanksgiving together. My broadcasting takeaway actually was from neither Hubie Brown nor Mike Breen. It was actually from sideline reporter Lisa Salters recounting a story about Shaquille O'Neal, talking about Eric Dampier and referring to him via national media as Erica. Unbelievable.
And that he should be playing in the WNBA. And I was like, there's no way that Lisa Salters would ever be able to tell that story now. Shaq would just be the backlash would have been crazy.
Condemned. Yeah, absolutely. It's just 16 years ago. And Mike Breen kind of chuckles or laughs it off. And is like, oh, okay, friendly animosity between two 7-footers. And it's nowadays, the whole crew would be like, wow, that's not very nice at all.
No. They wouldn't do it. Not with somebody of Shaq's stature. They would just not tell the story. They just wouldn't be there.
Unbelievable. And then the
Um,
second part on Hubie Brown explaining a pick and pop late in the game, like it was just unbelievable to hear him kind of go
yeah.
into this minutia. It was fantastic.
Yeah, Mike Breen explaining early in the first quarter after like Udonis Haslem picked up his like, he picked up 2 foul. Udonis Haslem was in foul trouble all night, and he
Yep.
picked up 2 fouls in the first couple minutes, and they subbed him out because Udonis Haslem was obviously a starter back then.
Yep.
And Mike Breen making the point, and this is again his first broadcast as a play-by-play guy for in the finals, in the finals, and had to explain why they were taking him out, a starter, and had to explain what fouling out was. Could you imagine if Mike Breen was explaining what fouling out was to the national audience in the 2022 NBA Finals? Be like, what are you wasting our time for?
It's not like basketball was this general unknown or anything like that. It's like we understand how many fouls you got, and it wasn't like
Yeah.
it was fresh off the NCAA tournament or anything. Like it's just very weird how they just
I
the
wonder if it was
finals.
just because it
You
was like
realize now it's
Breen's
bigger than ever.
first. I wonder if it was because it was Breen's first, and he was just trying to like,
I don't
okay,
know.
it's not just your daily NBA fan. This is supposed to be the Super Bowl of the NBA, and then we got a lot of casual
Maybe
fans who might not know
that's
stuff.
it.
But
That
he
could be
never
it.
did it. He never did it again. So obviously the producer was like, "Yo, don't do that. Stop doing
Don't
that."
don't talk down to our audience like they're dummies.
Right.
They'll figure
Well,
it
if
out.
they're casual fans, they don't care that Udonis Haslem's coming out 4 minutes into the game. It doesn't
They're
matter.
not watching for UT anyway. Exactly.
Right. Um, the other part of this too, you mentioned Lisa Salters, Stuart Scott. So Lisa Salters was doing the Heat side of the sideline reporting. Stuart Scott was doing the Maverick side.
Right.
First of all, both of them were awesome. Lisa Salters still is awesome at her job, and I was really just impressed with the overall
Yep.
quality of it. But what was so interesting is that we didn't see them. We didn't see
Not
them
till
until
the game
halftime.
ended.
Until
Yeah.
halftime. It was the first time we
Yeah.
saw them. We didn't see Mike Breen or Hubie Brown until I think it was in the fourth quarter, when what's his name? I forget who got hit in the nose and he was bleeding in his
Stackhouse.
nose. Stackhouse, yeah.
Stackhouse.
Stackhouse got elbowed by Shaq. He's bleeding, and they're doing the whole taking care of it, patching it up so he's not bleeding on the court thing. And they literally just had nothing else to talk about. So it was the only reason they ever panned to Breen and Mike Brown or Hubie Brown. Otherwise, we would have never seen them. There was no stand up before the game. There was no like the whole pomp and circumstance of it all. Nothing,
Right.
no cutaways, no picture in pictures. We just did not see any of these people. It was just
The
their
production's
voices,
changed completely.
uninhabited
It's changed
voices.
completely.
The other part
Yeah.
of it too, no advertisements on the stanchion, no advertisements on the sidelines. The entire sideline area where you
oh,
see like people
yeah.
sitting like on the
Yeah.
sideline, instead of
I
it
miss
being
it.
like Kia or Coors Light or whatever it is, it just said 2006 NBA Finals presented by ABC. That was
What a
it.
concept.
Zero advertising happening. It was so interesting. That part was to me more than the stylistic thing of another world, of another era. So
Yeah.
much wasted ad space.
For a good thing, though. I mean, it could get very distracting. I think for a
It
lot of
was
people,
more
but
enjoyable, wasn't it? The
I think so.
broadcast.
Yeah, it was a little cleaner, a little simpler, and that's fine
Yeah.
with me. Like none of the pomp and circumstances that you pointed out, not a lot of the flashy. And you look at this was the broadcast; it cut out the commercials and stuff like that. But either way, it just the production value didn't feel poor. It just felt, a little slower, a little bit with less everything, which is what today's broadcast.
They
has
didn't keep
become
cutting
so much
away
of.
from the basketball game. That was
Right.
great. What an idea.
No,
What a novel
no weird
concept. Just show the
no
basketball
weird
game.
angle cameras,
Right,
no
the weird the
So,
sideline seats
yeah,
camera that you
yeah.
can't see anything from. You just see everybody's knees and you're like, "Why do I want this? I don't want any of this." All right.
Yeah.
Couple more categories here. Let's get to our most hated Maverick. So we're going to do
Oh.
this every game. I think every game.
Yeah.
We'll just who's the Maverick you just hated the most in this game? I'll let you start, David.
Jason Terry had a good game. Dirk was Dirk, but to me, Adrian Griffin came in there and just hit a couple of shots. He was the good defender, supposedly, on Dwyane Wade. Just
Yeah.
didn't like him at all. Yeah, he just felt like an annoying presence out there that I didn't need to see.
So it was a surprise that they started him, right? That was a little bit of a wrinkle.
Yeah. Yeah.
I guess he was their defensive leaning guard,
Right.
and so they put him out there to defend Dwyane Wade,
Challenge Wade.
obviously, and so that was a little bit of a lineup shift for Avery Johnson. Look, I see where you're going. I think you're getting a little too cute with it, honestly. It's Jason Terry. Just come on. 32 points. He made 4 3-pointers in that game. He had that
Yeah.
dunk in the second quarter that you mentioned earlier, and he just did that stupid jet celebration that he does. That is he the worst player ever to have a signature celebration? I think the answer has to be yes, right?
Well, no, Darius Miles doing this thing with
Oh.
Quentin Richardson, former
Well,
Heat
was
player.
that? Did
Quentin
he do that
Richardson.
all the time? Jason Terry did it all the time. I guess Wesley Matthews could be the one. Wesley Matthews every time he makes a 3 does the bow and arrow thing.
Matthews is better than Darius Miles. No knock on Darius
No, but he's
Miles
not
at the
better.
time,
But he's not better than Jason Terry, right?
no,
All
no,
timer.
Darius.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So yeah, you're right. It's like probably like a Darius Miles or like a Wesley Matthews, somewhere in that. Terry's on the list. All right.
Most annoying for sure.
That's true.
And I hate his tattoo art from 2010, but that's a whole other story.
This one's going to be called the Luke Babbitt Award. It was the I didn't realize you were out there award. I've got Gary Payton. I had no idea he played in that game. No idea he played in that game. Let me give the stat line really quick, just to the listeners the stat line here. He comes off the bench for about 19 minutes, took 4 shots, made none of them, had 5 rebounds, had an assist. He had 3 steals in that game, but again, didn't notice any of them. Had no idea he had a single steal in that game. He was a -8, 0 impact. Did not realize he was out there.
Hubie Brown, that's what he does when he slaps the ball out of a player. That's what he does. He's always done that throughout his career. He knocked the ball loose on somebody driving to the rim at one point. And yeah, that's right. He wasn't a very good defensive player. At that point in time, not quite as good defensively. He was clearly ring chasing, and that's fine. Like he had a connection with Shaq from their brief time in Los Angeles. I guess he wasn't necessary on any other team. He couldn't join the Spurs, couldn't join the the Mavericks. And
he has a really big game later in this series, doesn't he?
He does.
So he's not quote unquote, he's not completely washed, but he looked very washed in game 1.
Just not very impactful. But a lot of players on the Miami side did not seem like they stood out.
Wasn't
Jason Williams,
Dwyane Wade had a great first quarter. He could have been. He was Luke Babbitting the rest of the game. Really, I didn't really feel his presence enough.
To me, it was actually, I'm sorry, Alonzo Mourning. A little sad to see him out there because we know what happens. And again, as I mentioned in last week's episode where we were kind of previewing this rewatch, like I was excited to see how the conversation in my own head changed about Zoe's minutes versus Shaq, because towards the tail end of the series, Zoe felt like so much more of an impactful player, and neither of them were particularly huge in this game. You know, you had Shaq kind of struggling past the size of Jop and Dampier. Zoe was just not good at all.
He only played 5 minutes.
Yeah, and he did nothing out there. Like 0 stat. I think he had 1 rebound. Yeah, 1 rebound and 1 foul in 5 minutes, and -6 out there. It's just not good. Like he was just lost. He wasn't athletic enough. Look, again, I mean, this guy got a new kidney, so it's not like we can just knock him or anything like that. But yeah, it was tough watching him out here and be just completely bland and unwatchable. Like he was just not a very good player at that point in his career. Luckily for him, he wound up mustering whatever strength he needed to stay impactful later in the series.
It's a good pick because also as we look forward and kind of thread the through line through the series, him doing what you sort of flipping his own game flips the series, right? It's sort of the thing that flips the series, in addition to Dwyane Wade just being amazing.
It helps.
Other thing here, next category, Pat Riley's doghouse. This is self-explanatory. Who's in the doghouse for Pat Riley? By the way, watching Pat Riley on the sideline with the ring, the suit, he has this beautiful watch, and I couldn't figure out what brand it was. I couldn't quite see it, but it was. I don't know that it was a Rolex, but not that he doesn't. I think he has a Rolex. He just chose not to wear it that night. But it didn't match with the championship ring, I guess. But I've got Udonis Haslem, actually. 5 fouls in 33 minutes. Had to keep coming out. It kind of felt that Udonis Haslem's game was very sort of symbolic of Miami's game in general. Just there were moments, but they could never really get in rhythm. And it just felt like Haslem couldn't get on the floor for 3 straight minutes before he would foul. It was the early foul trouble that was obviously the problem. And some of the fouls were questionable. You know, I'm not going to do the whole did the refs screw him in game 1 16 years later, but
we know how it turned out, so it's not as annoying.
Yeah, but I think if anybody was in the doghouse, it was probably Udonis Haslem after game 1.
To me, it was Antoine. Like a lot of those shots that he was taking, like 3 of 9 from 3-point range, and you see Riley just kind of like, "What the hell are you doing? Why are you taking so many of these shots?" Again,
Larry Bird would never.
It just felt like it was rush shots, and Riley hates those. And every time Antoine hit or took a shot and missed, like Riley would turn around in frustration. Like you could just see from the body language on the sideline that he was not happy with these chucks, these chucking shots that Antoine was taking.
My dad and I had a nickname for Antoine Walker, and it was the Chucker.
Yeah,
that was what we call. Here we go. Here's the Chucker again.
Nowadays, He finished 33%, like 3 and 9. That's not even that bad.
Okay.
Like if he hits one more, everybody's going, wow, incredible minutes for Antoine Walker. But at the time, everybody's just like, why is he taking so many threes? The possession just
I'm
dies that way.
so glad you bring that up. All right, because that goes right into our next segment, and I'm so excited for this one. It is called the Time Machine Trade Machine. All right, I've worked very hard on this. So here's the idea:
Yeah.
you make a trade between the 2022 Miami Heat and the 2006 Miami Heat, and this includes salaries, which was not easy to do. But the salary has to match, even though you're going through space, the time continuum, the salary still have to match.
Okay.
That's just how powerful the CBA is. Here's my trade. The 2022 Miami Heat get Antoine Walker and Darrell Wright for salary matching purposes. They get Darrell Wright off the bench. Antoine Walker, you just said it. 6'8", 224. You could start him at power forward. He had
He's your
17
PJ
points,
Tucker.
6 rebounds, 4 assists in that game. Yeah, he went 3 of 9 from threes, but that's respectable enough. I'll take that. The 2006 Miami Heat, by the way, they lost game 1. I think they could have used more shooting, like we were talking about, 5 of 18 from three-point range. I'm going to give them Caleb Martin and Max Strus. A couple of decent shooters. Caleb Martin, some athleticism there. Speed up the game a little bit. Strus coming off the bench, nailing some threes, coming around the corners of those Shaq screens, those Udonis Haslem high screens. Let's go. Let's get it going here. So the Heat get Caleb Martin and Max Strus. The salaries all match. Actually, Antoine Walker back then made $500,000 more than Caleb Martin will make this next season. I found that interesting. But yeah,
well, he signed a huge contract once upon. No, I think it's great.
No,
I think
Antoine Walker $6.9 million. Caleb Martin makes 6.4, and then Darrell Wright and Max Strus basically make the same amount. Strus is at 1.8 million. Darrell Wright made 1.2 back then.
Caleb would have supplanted James Posey, I think, as a defensive stopper, and I think with athleticism would have been greater. Like he would have been out there, he would have absolutely provided high value. And Strus, I think he probably would have been playable. Like again, there was just that idea that white players in general were probably just going to put up 3 or 4 shots per game, and they were all going to be from 3.
Yeah.
He's not Tim Legler, so I wonder how people, how they would have responded to his ability.
He would have beat out Jason Williams. And I'm a big Jason Williams fan. You're not going to find a bigger Heat fan.
You would have made a big lineup with Dwyane Wade at the point, ostensibly, and then kind of have Max at the 2. I mean, that would have been a fantastic lineup.
I'm okay with
it. They would crush the Mavericks, I think. But we'll see.
Strus would have held up better defensively, and Jason Williams just got. I know I already said it, but just torched defense. Like there's no way he could have played in these finals. There's just no way. All right, we have 2 more categories. These are the categories that we're going to finish each of our episodes with. These are going to get actually more interesting as the series goes on, but I want to introduce them to our audience, David. First of all, the Mark Cuban angry scale, because we know how upset Mark Cuban gets as the series goes on and as Dwyane Wade picks up more and more fouls. In today's game, I'm going to put it on a scale of 1 to 10. I'm going to just make it a 1. Obviously, Dallas wins the game. I don't even know if we told everybody the score. Not that it matters, but it was 90 to
80. Yeah.
They
powerhouse.
The Mavericks win the game. I almost put this at like a 1.5 and a 2 because there was a point where Mark Cuban is sitting sideline and he's kind of making motions at the referee. Like I'm not really sure what he's trying to say. Hit his hand up like a teapot or something. It was so weird. He was doing like I'm the little teapot dance, and I was like, I don't know what you're trying to communicate, Mark.
I'm glad you mentioned that because I hadn't thought of it in that perspective, but now forever I will. Like his huge cereal box head going out there doing a little teapot dance, like he's motioning like somebody's crying for a foul. It's like, or what are you doing there? You're a billionaire. Like, come on, have a little composure, a little dignity. But yes, it was I'm a little teapot. I have no idea.
Do you think we'll reach a 10?
Do you think we'll there were moments 10? There.
Yeah.
When Wade is getting like a lot of foul calls in his favor, he's gonna lose his. He's gonna go crazy at some point. We know it, and it's fine. It's great. It's fun watching him. But yeah, he was mostly calm. They didn't cut to him a lot. Like the spectacle of Mark Cuban doesn't become such a norm at that point. Like, I thought
we saw him as much as they considering maybe in today's day like it wasn't, but back considering like what we were saying, like it was mostly just a basketball game. I thought they were cutting to him quite a bit. We got him like 4 or 5 times. I felt.
Like Steve Ballmer gets like 10 shots per game because he's usually doing something crazy or inappropriate. So, but I mean, this is a little different. Like, I don't know. It just, I didn't feel like I saw a lot of Mark Cuban, which is fine with me. I didn't need to watch him. I was there to watch the game, not Mark Cuban.
This is the last of our the last of our finishers category is going to ask the simple question: has Dwyane Wade achieved legendary status yet? I think the answer for now is no.
Yeah, pretty clear. I think they were talking about him in a way that made it seem like, and if you put it in context of the league in general, like Kobe Bryant was fine. He was still a great player, obviously, but you were still looking for somebody to replace what Jordan was. You had
Yeah.
LeBron James emerging as a young all-star, but nobody was the face of the league. And they're starting to kind of market Dwyane as, well, he's a really good player, and you guys should watch him because he's really
Yeah.
fun and really athletic, etc. But nobody quite that has the same
And
star attraction as what Jordan once did.
it's such a good point that you make because the broadcast even told the story about how Dwyane Wade grew up in Chicago and idolizing
Yeah.
Michael Jordan, obviously, and you could tell them trying to make that connection.
Hey,
And
remember the
people,
guy that was here that had the ratings up so high just 5
right,
years ago, 6 years ago?
yeah,
Come back. Come back. We're
yeah.
still good. I
Where we
trust
didn't
you.
have to explain what fouling out was. It was, and you also make a really good point where Kobe Bryant was a really great player, and I think a lot of again our younger fans that you think of Kobe sort of just being the embodiment of Michael Jordan and embodying that whole aura, but there was a point in the early 2000s and in 2006 here, obviously, where Kobe Bryant was sort of just right in front of us as the next Michael Jordan, and yet we
Yep.
kept looking for the next Michael Jordan.
Well, you had
That
Shaq.
was we
He
had
was riding
Shaq.
Shaq's coattails, etc.
LeBron
That's what
was
the
obviously
perception was.
came into the league a few years before this, and everybody was he's the next great one. He's the next Michael Jordan, and as we obviously learned, LeBron is going to go down as one of the two greatest players of all time, but a very different kind of player than Michael Jordan. Where Kobe was just trying to mimic everything that Michael Jordan did, and we never really looked at him that way. We never really appreciated Kobe in that way
Not
until
till
a few
later.
years later. He ended up winning a couple more finals with Pau Gasol after the Shaq era, and we kind of realized, and we took a step back. Oh no, this was the Michael Jordan all along, and the way that his
Yeah.
peers and people growing up viewed and idolized Kobe was very similar to how Kobe idolized and Dwyane Wade idolized MJ. And so that was a good point. It's just sort of interesting to think about that kind of stuff. All right. That's it. Any other thoughts before we sign off on here and
Looking
before we get to game
forward to
two?
looking forward to game two. So exciting. I hope you stick with us. We want to hear from you. If you have your own recollections of the game, if there was something that you think we should bring up as we continue to break down these games later on, please make sure to send those suggestions in. You can always reach out to us via email, via Twitter, or you can leave a comment on YouTube. I'm so excited to be a part of this as we're engaging with fans of the team who may not have really been able to appreciate the series. And just from my own perspective as now a media member, 16 years ago, it was very, very different to watch those games. And my perception at the time, very, very different than what it is now as I watch games. So it's just an exciting moment. So I'm glad we're sharing this with all of our listeners and viewers.
Yeah, so much fun stuff to dig into. We're going to have a bunch of hypotheticals, what ifs, the best performances. I'm really excited to go and watch game two. That's coming out Wednesday. This is Locked On Heat. Thanks for joining us.